Hey guys. Tonight we drift back to the lofty heights of Mount Olympus, where the air always smells faintly of olive oil, thunderclouds, and divine drama. You're floating high above the mortal world, surrounded by marble columns that never gather dust, and golden goblets that somehow refill themselves. Somewhere a harp plays itself lazily, just slightly off-key, probably on purpose. But the air feels tense, thick with the kind of silence that says, someone's mad, and you should absolutely not ask who. You spot Hera, queen of the gods, standing perfectly still in the middle of the throne room. Her eyes are on the horizon. Her jaw is set like she's just read a passive-aggressive scroll from her husband. You get the feeling Zeus, the king of lightning and inconvenient decisions, is about to have a very long day. Hera does not stomp. She glides, annoyedly but elegantly. You trail behind her, your sandals soundless on the polished celestial floor. She passes a statue of herself, one of several dozen, and sighs just slightly. A palace guard blinks, catches her expression, and suddenly remembers he has to check the perimeter for invisible monsters. Again. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, post your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing just how many of us are drifting off together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Zeus, for all his thunder-slinging bravado, is still, at his core, a guy who can forget dates. Specifically the date that marks the last time he made Hera feel like she mattered. Which is today, again, for the 3rd century in a row. You find yourself floating by an impossibly fluffy cumulus cloud, peeking down at a divine planner. It has today's date, circled in angry red ink, next to the words Wedding Remembrance Ritual. That word, ritual, is underlined. Twice. The scribe responsible for reminding Zeus is probably already turning into a constellation called That Guy Who Got Smote. Olympus itself seems to sense Hera's mood. The clouds churn slowly, lazily, but not peacefully. It's like the sky is holding its breath. A few lesser gods slink around corners. Eros, god of love, tiptoes by with his bow hidden under his toga. Even Hades, visiting for brunch, politely excuses himself, and the garden responds with a soft breeze, rustling leaves that sound vaguely like sympathetic sighs. Somewhere in the distance, a pomegranate drops with ominous squishiness. For all her cool demeanor, Hera is furious. But this is not mortal fury. It won't come with yelling or thrown dishes. This is the fury of someone with the patience of eternity and access to supernatural storage lockers full of forgotten enchantments. Historical records, believe it or not, do hint at cult practices in ancient Samos and Argos that revered Hera not just as queen, but as punisher of broken vows. These cults had rituals involving freezing waters, iron offerings, and whisper chants under the moon. Modern archaeologists still debate whether these ceremonies were symbolic or meant to literally cool the fires of divine tempers. You have a feeling Hera is choosing the literal route. She leaves the garden. You float after her. Every step she takes echoes with purpose. Past the Hall of Mirrors, which only shows your worst angles, past the chamber of echoes, where every complaint is repeated back in poetic form, and finally to a small, forgotten vault built from obsidian and sass. Inside, relics. Strange ones. A cracked hourglass filled with stardust. A broken harp string that hums in a minor key. And at the very back, glowing faintly blue, a clay jar sealed with layers of ancient wax. You barely breathe as she lifts the jar. Even the jar looks like it knows something bad is coming. This, dear sleepy listener, is Talentos Krios, the cold will. A spell from before the Olympians, back when gods froze time out of pettiness and bound hurricanes in jars just because someone looked at them wrong. It hasn't been used since that incident with the Titan who tried to flirt with Gaia and got stuck inside a glacier for 800 years. Hera doesn't need to read the instructions. She was there when it was made. Now here's the strange bit. There was once a temple inscription found in Lerna, mentioning a storm-calm Hera, one who locked the bolts of heaven for 7 nights. Historians still argue whether this was a metaphor for famine, marital protest, or just really strange weather. But in this version, you watch as Hera breaks the seal. A wave of unnatural chill sweeps through the room. Lightning, way up in the stratosphere, falters. Somewhere, Zeus burps and looks mildly confused. The air on Olympus begins to still. The clouds stop swirling. You swear you can hear thunder. Forget how to...
Zeus, meanwhile, is having a perfectly average morning, which for him involves juggling lightning, ogling clouds shaped like swans, and trying not to get called into any divine family meetings. You trail behind him as he lounges shirtless on a floating chest that hovers somewhere between powerful and insecure gym bro. He stretches, snaps his fingers. Nothing happens. He blinks, snaps again. Still nothing. Now, to be fair, thunderbolts don't always arrive on cue. Sometimes they're delayed by bureaucratic hiccups, like Hermes misfiling celestial requests, or Apollo taking artistic liberties with atmospheric scheduling. But when Zeus, king of storms and petty flexes, can't conjure even a flicker of static, that's a problem. He tries a third time, this time with a grunt and a dramatic hand flourish, and gets absolutely nothing but a polite poof sound. Somewhere nearby, a squirrel sneezes. The gods have noticed. You drift just behind him as a satyr walks by, glances at Zeus's empty palm, and does a double take so exaggerated it could qualify as interpretive dance. Moments later, you catch the whisper ripple through Olympus like a divine game of telephone. Did you hear? Hera did what? Zeus is sparkless. Now, Zeus isn't stupid. He may not be self-aware exactly, but he's ruled long enough to recognize sabotage when he smells it. And this smells suspiciously like vanilla, vengeance, and ancient frost spells. He storms, ironically without any actual storms, into the administrative wing of Olympus, an overly gold chamber staffed by bored celestial interns who haven't blinked since 200 BCE. "I want to speak to the fates," Zeus announces, chest puffed. There's a pause. One of the interns, a minor demigod named Glycon, looks up from an enchanted clipboard and stammers, the fates don't take walk-ins, sir. They're booked solid through the next 5 reincarnations." You can see Zeus's eye twitch. Now, for context, the fates, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, are kind of like the HR department of the universe, but with sharper scissors. They don't usually interfere unless something's gone really sideways, like a timeline imploding or a hero becoming too popular. But Zeus wants answers, and when he doesn't get them, he does the next most logical thing: sulk. He retreats to his chambers, grand echoing halls where his robes hang themselves and a marble statue of him winks every hour on the hour. You follow him as he paces, occasionally trying to summon a storm out of sheer stubbornness. The only response is a single embarrassed raindrop that plops sadly onto a scroll. He throws the scroll. It hits a harp, which starts playing Careless Whisper. Now here's your historical tidbit of the night. During the Pan-Athenaic festival in ancient Athens, priests would sometimes observe the skies before major decisions. One recorded instance in 423 BCE involved a sudden, quote, silence in the heavens. No wind, no thunder, not even bird calls. Some scholars theorize this was linked to distant weather anomalies. Others whisper it might have been divine protest, but most just agree. It freaked everyone out. Zeus is now at that exact stage of the tantrum. He sends a lightning request via official bolt scroll. Nothing. He tries yelling at the sky. It echoes back with suspicious sass. Finally, he sends a formal complaint using his seal, an actual gold signet ring featuring himself striking a dramatic pose. The scroll disappears into thin air, presumably to be ignored forever. As you lounge nearby, the atmosphere grows dense, not with weather, but with awkward tension. You notice Hermes zipping past the window twice, clearly avoiding eye contact. Even Apollo, Mr. Sunshine himself, pretends to be super busy, tuning his lyre just out of hearing range. Then comes the kicker. A raven lands on the balcony. It tilts its head and croaks, "She froze your bolts." Zeus glares, "She what?" "Yup," the raven croaks, preening smugly. "Heard it straight from a naiad who heard it from a nymph who got it from a squirrel who saw the jar. Talentos Cryos. Classic hero move." Zeus growls. The raven drops a feather in a very judgmental way and flies off. Now you, the sleepy observer, just float silently through the unfolding tension, watching the gods pretend not to gossip, and Zeus try to remember where he stored his backup thunder. Spoiler, he didn't. He never does. And just when you think things couldn't get more delightfully pathetic, enter the Oracle Hotline. That's not what it's actually called, of course, but tucked into a discreet corner of the palace is a long-forgotten alcove where Zeus keeps a dusty crystal connected to the whispers of Delphi. He leans in dramatically, asking, "What is happening to me?" The crystal fizzes, then fizzles. Then a bored voice sighs through it. "Have you tried apologizing?" Zeus stares, then hangs up. Scholars still debate whether the loss of lightning myth, a lesser-known variant from the island of Delos, refers to symbolic impotence, emotional withdrawal, or just a blackout caused by divine mood swings. Most agree it's probably Hera's. You, cozy on your celestial perch, can't help but enjoy the irony. The king of Olympus, brought low by the emotional equivalent of an iced-out silent treatment. And the sky? Still quiet. Still. You trail behind Hera now, through hallways that echo with her determination. The golden sconces lining the palace flicker slightly as she passes, though not from any wind. They just know better than to stay bright when Hera's brooding. The Queen of Olympus has a plan. Not the usual smiting kind. No, this is pettier, subtler, the kind of plan that comes with a smirk, a spreadsheet, and an unnecessarily complicated ritual involving obscure herbs and the tears of someone who disappointed her in 400 BC. You find her in her private salon, a lavish chamber that smells faintly of lilacs, punishment, and expensive drama.
A circle of peacocks lounges nearby, preening in silence. Each one wears a small gold ring on one talon, probably gifted after some long-forgotten divine spat. One peacock, slightly plumper than the rest, keeps making judgmental eye contact with you. You blink first. It wins. Hera lights a candle with a snap of her fingers. The flame burns blue. A sign that she's not just annoyed, she's invoking the list. Every god has one. Mortals keep them too, of course, but the divine versions are enchanted, and when you open one, the pages flip on their own, bringing up ancient offenses alphabetically, then cross-referenced by smugness. Hera's list is long. The papyrus scroll unfurls across the floor and rolls out the door. You follow her gaze as it lands on a specific entry. Zeus, forgot anniversary, again. Subnotes include, gave me thunderbolt-shaped earrings as a gesture. Claimed he thought our sacred union was symbolic. Asked if I could just remind him next time. The peacock lets out a haughty humph. Now, in some obscure parts of Arcadia, locals used to whisper that Hera kept a secret collection of divine trinkets and punishment charms, each one crafted not to kill, but to inconvenience. A mirror that reflects your most regrettable haircut. A pillow that whispers your forgotten errands at 3 a.m. Some even believed she once froze a god's voice for a week so she could get through brunch in peace. Whether any of this is true, historians still argue, but in this room, it all feels very real. She walks over to an obsidian chest, locked with a clasp shaped like a smirking mask. With a flick of her hand, it opens to reveal a carefully curated assortment of magical oddities. A bracelet that makes you incapable of lying, a goblet. This is the Spell of Stillfire, a secondary enchantment designed to keep the Talentos Krios locked in place. Without it, Zeus might regain his spark early. With it, he's grounded, electrically and emotionally. She begins laying out ingredients. Each one floats gently into place, hovering mid-air, as she hums a hymn older than language itself. You hear phrases that sound like, "Let him stew," and "divine consequences." One of the peacocks nods approvingly. And here's your historical fact for the section. In the sanctuary of Hera at Paracora, archaeologists found several tiny lead figurines, miniature cows, humans, and even birds, thought to be votive offerings. Some are theorized to represent symbolic bindings, tiny curses or hopes cast into ritual fires. What if, just what if, they weren't symbolic? What if they were the divine version of voodoo fridge magnets? Hera adds one such figurine to her spell, a small metal Zeus, arms raised as if to say, "What did I do?" She smiles faintly. The room chills. Magic hums gently through the air, like a lullaby being hummed by someone who's plotting your entire week's misfortunes. She seals the spell with a kiss, not out of affection, but protocol. Magic's weird like that. And with that final gesture, the pouch glows briefly, then fades. The thunderbolts will stay frozen. The spell will hold. Unless someone finds the original jar, opens it, and sings a forgiveness chant in Dorian mode, which, frankly, no one's going to do before lunch. You glide beside her as she settles back on a lounge chair, her demeanor calm now, like a chess player who just placed a really satisfying pawn. She sips nectar from a goblet that refills itself with only the good kind of gossip. Outside, the clouds hang still, like sheep that know they're supposed to stay in line. And then she says it, softly but clearly. Maybe now he'll listen. One of the peacocks fluffs up in solidarity. This is the part where a mortal would second-guess themselves. Where a mortal would say, maybe I went too far, or what if I just talked to him? Hera is not a mortal. Hera is the embodiment of sacred vows and decorative vengeance. She believes in communication. After you've won, a small scroll appears beside her. A note from Artemis. He's trying to call the fates again. They sent him a We're Out of the Office poem. Hera doesn't laugh, but you think she might have smiled, a little. And just like that, the day continues. Quiet, balanced. Zeus is not handling this well. It's not the lack of thunderbolts that's breaking him. It's the implication. The sheer horror of a king of Olympus who can't summon a dramatic weather event to punctuate his exits? That's existential. You watch him from the shadows of the east balcony, where he's currently trying to manually hurl a storm cloud using nothing but his upper body strength and loud, godly grunting. The cloud floats lazily away, ignoring his best efforts, and then rains politely on a goat. Betrayed, he mutters, not even noticing that the goat has wandered off with one of his sandals. And if things weren't already grim, they're about to get worse. Because here comes Hermes. Now, Hermes is many things: messenger god, trickster, unofficial patron of petty drama. But today, he's also the poor soul with the honor of delivering the mid-morning Olympus newsletter, which is just a fancy way of saying he's here to deliver bad news with flair. He skates in. Yes, literally. His winged sandals now fitted with divine rollerblades, and spins to a stop, scroll in hand. "Hey, Big Z," Hermes says, avoiding eye contact. "So, couple updates from Mount Olympus Weekly." Zeus groans. You trail beside him as he mutters something about needing a new PR team. Hermes clears his throat and reads aloud. Item 1. Dionysus has been voted most likely to replace you in a crisis by a council of, well, mostly himself. But the vote stands. Zeus groans louder. Item 2. Artemis has created a Thunder-muted group chat for the other gods. She says it's just memes, but I've seen some of them. Lot of jokes about static claim. At this point, Zeus closes his eyes and inhales deeply, as though willing himself to disintegrate into stardust and start over as a mortal cobbler. But Hermes isn't done. Item 3, and you're not gonna like this one. We've received formal petition number 324C from the Council of Lesser Winds. They're asking if the skies are open for rental since, well, Hermes gestures vaguely at the painfully clear blue dome above. And that's the final blow. Out! Zeus booms. Or rather, attempts to. It comes out more like a moderately upset dad at a suburban barbecue. Hermes salutes, rollerblades backward, and vanishes in a puff of sandal polish. Zeus slumps. Now here's the historical drop-in. In early Etruscan myths, the god Tinia, often likened to Zeus, was believed to carry. It's not metaphorical. There's an actual chamber in Olympus, floor-to-ceiling onyx, designed for yelling. Every word you speak echoes back, tenfold, in increasingly exaggerated tones. It's usually reserved for therapy, venting, or practicing speeches to impress mortals.
He steps in. "I am still powerful," the chamber replies. "You are slightly diminished." Zeus rubs his temples. He tries again. "I am a storm incarnate." The chamber offers back. "You were a storm, now mostly mist." He exits without comment. From here, you trail him into the Hall of Relics. If thunderbolts won't answer his call, perhaps there's an older way. A secret stash. Something from the days before Olympus had rules, robes, or quarterly reports. The hall is rarely visited. Its walls are lined with forgotten weapons, dusty trophies, and a collection of incredibly cursed hats. A magical harp plays off-key elevator music in the corner. Zeus ignores it. He walks past the spear of Themis, last used in a dramatic breakup duel, a snoring helmet, and a glowing cube labeled "Do not open during Mercury retrograde." And then he finds it. A rod of petrified wood fused with quartz and humming ever so slightly with latent energy. This, he recalls, is Protobolt Alpha, his very first attempt at channeling sky energy. It once caused a 6-year summer and melted a mountain. But it also attracted bees, a lot of bees, hence why it was retired. Desperate, he lifts it. There's a rumble, a flicker of light. For the first time in days, his hair starts to frizz with power. You can feel the air charge around him, like the moment just before a really juicy family argument. Then, nothing. The rod lets out a tiny, embarrassed squeak, and then explodes into glitter. Zeus coughs. And here's your fringe tidbit. A Babylonian tablet discovered near Nippur describes a sky king who lost the voice of heaven and tried to build a tower to regain it. Historians believe this may be an early version of either a god losing power myth or a very dramatic metaphor for seasonal weather patterns. Either way, it's not a flattering precedent. Back in Olympus, Zeus sits among the wreckage of the protobolt, glitter slowly coating his robes. He doesn't cry, but he does ask. By the next morning, Zeus has entered the final stage of divine meltdown, performative gardening. You find him in Olympus's usually forbidden hanging terrace, sleeves rolled, tunic untucked, muttering to a ficus. He's armed with shears, a watering can, and absolutely zero horticultural knowledge. A flower wilts just by being nearby. The thunder god, now demoted to thunderless god, is attempting to prune ambrosia vines, like a man trying to win back a lover via topiary. "I made you, you ungrateful shrub," he hisses at a hydrangea that's blooming defiantly out of season. The hydrangea does not care. And in a way, neither does Hera. You see, she's watching from a higher balcony, swirling her goblet of mood nectar, cherry and revenge flavored, you suspect, silently enjoying the view of Zeus trimming divine hedges in what can only be described as emotionally charged choreography. The other gods, of course, have noticed. Apollo has composed a ballad about the day the sky went awkwardly silent. It's not subtle. A chorus of naiads sings back up. Ares challenged Zeus to a sparring match and offered to go easy since you're, emotionally flammable right now. Even Hestia, warm-hearted and drama-averse, has set a new rule. No lightning, no voice at the council table.
which makes sense, since lightning was Zeus's version of punctuation. And here's where we introduce our mainstream historical fact of the hour. In ancient Delphi, priests would sometimes interpret divine silence as ominous. If Apollo, through the oracle, went quiet, it wasn't peace. It was a warning. A quiet temple meant someone upstairs was fuming. Today, that someone is Zeus, and the silence, deafening. You follow him now through the northern wing, past the statues of past Olympians, some honored, some awkwardly half-covered by under-renovation drapes, because no one wants to talk about when Kratos got on the Pantheon design committee. The statues seem to look away as he passes. Even marble can feel embarrassment. Eventually, he ends up in his private thunder chamber, normally a swirling cyclone of clouds, crackling wires of raw sky energy, and occasional flaming pigeons. Now, though, still. Dim. A single cloud sulks in the corner, sobbing lightningless sobs. You sense the moment he decides to break the rules. No more waiting for Hera to undo the spell. No more hints, no more newsletters. He's going to steal his power back. Which, given his current standing, is like trying to order delivery from a restaurant you burned down. But he has a plan, one that involves Mount Othrys. Ah, yes, Mount Othrys. Still, Zeus thinks, if he can find the last remnants of the Titan-forged storm essence hidden in the mountain's heart, he might just bypass Hera's curse entirely. Of course, the journey is dangerous, the outcome is speculative, and the last person to try spelunking there became a constellation. But desperate times call for mythologically questionable field trips. And here's a fringe tidbit to add some spice. There's an obscure Orphic hymn that mentions a boltless thunder, a soundless force held deep in the earth, predating even Uranus. Some scholars think it was metaphorical. Others suggest it referred to Titan magic, locked away after the Great War. The hymn was banned in polite company after 300 BCE. Make of that what you will. You follow Zeus as he sneaks past Cerberus, who just yawns. He's off duty. Climbs onto a chariot drawn by disgruntled griffins, and sets course for Othrys. Now, you'd think stealth might be key here, but Zeus is the type who thinks wearing a cloak counts as subtlety, even if it's stitched with lightning bolts and his name in runes. He grumbles as the chariot bumps over a thermal draft. You hear him mutter, "I'll show them all. They'll see. Can't cancel thunder." Behind him, Olympus gets smaller. Hera, however, watches him go, not stopping him, not interfering, just sipping from her goblet again. She's already placed her bet. And so, the Sky King heads to the mountain of his past, his bolts still frozen, his ego thawing rapidly under the sun. There's something poetic here if you squint. The god who once ruled storms with a gesture now grovels before the old bones of the world, hoping they still remember his name. The chariot crests the first ridge of Othrys, and you feel the wind shift. Somewhere below, something ancient stirs. This is either going to be redemptive or very, very singed. Zeus arrives at Mount Othrys just before dusk, when the sky softens into that golden pink hue that makes even cursed geography look like a postcard. The griffins drop him off with passive-aggressive screeches, clearly offended at the lack of snacks. He ignores them, pulls his cloak tighter and trudges toward the cave mouth that breathes cold, ancient air. You drift behind him, watching the landscape shift. Othris isn't just a mountain. It's a wound in the earth where gods used to scream. Twisted trees line the slopes, their bark singed from battles long over. Stones hum underfoot with old grudges. Somewhere in the distance, a boulder yawns. Not metaphorically. It has teeth, and it's not happy to see Zeus. He steps over it. Inside, the cave opens like a forgotten cathedral, its walls etched with carvings older than timekeeping. Titan runes shimmer faintly, reacting to the presence of Olympian blood. This place remembers him. It just doesn't necessarily like him. As Zeus ventures deeper, the darkness thickens. Not the kind that frightens, but the kind that judges. The kind that makes you remember exactly what you did to your father, your uncle, your fellow Sky Kings. The silence weighs. And then, you hear it. A soft, rhythmic thump. Like a heartbeat trapped in stone. It's coming from the Hall of Echoes. Now this is not to be confused with Olympus's therapy room. This hall is where Kronos' chains were melted into the first weapons of war. It's where Hecaton cherries cried for centuries. And it's where, according to myth, the residual magic of Titan thunder was buried beneath 7 slabs of sky-forged basalt. Zeus stands before the largest of those slabs now. Etched across it is a single phrase in primal script. The sky can betray itself. He pretends he doesn't feel anything, but you know he does. And here's our historical fact drop. Ancient Greek city-states often reused sacred sites originally dedicated to earlier deities, burying their rituals under layers of newer worship. Delphi itself had older earth goddess roots before Apollo took over. Zeus is doing the divine version of that right now, trying to overwrite Titan echoes with Olympian desperation. He places his hand on the slab. Nothing. He whispers a few ancient syllables. Some are legit spells. One is a recipe for lentil stew. Still, nothing. Frustrated, he calls out, not just with his voice, but with memory. And that's when the slab pulses. A faint glow spreads across its surface. The cave shudders. Air thickens. You feel something crawling along your skin that isn't really there. It's not lightning. It's proto-lightning. The idea of lightning. Raw, stubborn, ugly. Zeus smiles for the first time in days. He places both hands now, leaning in. The mist coils around his arm like a confused eel. There's a flash, a scream from the mountain's core, and then he's blasted backward, skidding across the stone like a divine hockey puck. You rush over. He's smoking slightly, eyebrows gone, but in his hand is a fragment of the storm essence, a spark. Not enough for a full bolt, but a starting point. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some proto-Hellenic myths, there's mention of a sky seed, a piece of the heavens that, once planted, would regrow a storm. Scholars argue whether it refers to an actual object, a mythologized meteorite, or simply poetic nonsense that got out of hand. But you're staring at something that looks suspiciously like a sky seed. Zeus tucks it into his robes and stands. He's not fully restored, but he has something. A breath of storm, a whisper of boom. He limps out of the Hall of Echoes and makes camp near the mountain's summit. No fire, just quiet brooding. And you notice, faintly, above his head, a small, twitching cloud. It's not much, but it's trying. He looks up at it, gives a tired, lopsided grin. "Hey, buddy," he whispers. "Missed you." The cloud sneezes rain.
He lies back on the stone, hands behind his head, and for the first time in this ridiculous thunder-free saga, falls asleep. And from across the sky, you feel Hera stir. Not alarmed, just curious. She knows where he went. She probably let him go. But the question hangs. Will he actually learn anything from all this? Historians still debate whether gods can evolve, or whether they just get better at pretending to be self-aware. Some claim Zeus mellowed over time. Others argue he just outsourced his tantrums. Tonight, though, he's quiet, maybe thinking, or maybe dreaming of a thunderbolt that doesn't judge him. Either way, the sky starts to grumble, just a little. The next morning breaks with a grudging kind of light, the kind that seeps in through the cracks, not bold enough to shine, but nosy enough to observe. Zeus stirs beneath his threadbare traveling cloak, looking less like a sky god and more like a disgruntled shepherd who lost his sheep and found a midlife crisis instead. The small cloud above his head is still twitching. Not a proper storm, but persistent. He holds the fragment of storm essence up to the light. It flickers once, then sulks. Not exactly promising. But it's more than he had yesterday. And if there's one thing Zeus respects, it's incremental power gains. Now begins the return phase of the journey. But here's the catch. He can't just fly back to Olympus. His usual flight privileges are suspended due to his thunder baggage being in limbo, so he'll have to walk part of the way. Yes, walk. And that brings us to a wonderful historical callback. Did you know that in some of the earliest Greek religious processions, priests would literally carry sacred stones or symbols of gods for miles on foot? This divine schlepping wasn't just piety, it was tradition. If you want to be holy, apparently, you have to get your steps in. Zeus, to his credit, takes the situation with the stoicism of a man who's been publicly humbled, but privately still considers himself undefeated. His beard's frizzed, his robes singed, and his ego is being held together with metaphysical duct tape. But he walks, past ancient groves, through forgotten valleys, avoiding tourist routes because that one time in 450 BCE when a group of Spartans tried to selfie with him, never again. The storm essence buzzes faintly against his chest as he trudges on. You walk with him because, let's face it, at this point, you're invested, not just in whether Zeus gets his thunder back, but in whether he deserves to. And clearly, you're not the only one watching. As he rounds a bend near the river Lethe's lesser-known tributary, the one the gods use for dramatic brooding, he finds a figure waiting on a rock. It's Hermes. He's holding a scroll, chewing an olive, and looking like a man who's been paid in gossip instead of gold. "Well," Hermes says, not standing, "you look different." Zeus glares. "Did she send you?" he asks. Hermes shrugs. "She didn't not send me." Which is Hermes speak for she knows exactly where you are, and this is the most entertaining thing she's seen since Dionysus tried to teach oracles how to disco. "Tell her," Zeus grumbles. Not just any list. It's a detailed, bullet-pointed catalog of every time Zeus used thunder inappropriately. Every bolt launched in a mood swing, every dramatic clap in a minor disagreement, every time he threatened to
storm the kitchen because ambrosia was cold. It's long and handwritten in Hera's careful, looping script. You can't tell if Zeus is more annoyed or embarrassed, probably both. Hermes leans in. There's a message at the bottom. Zeus scans down. One sentence, in bold red ink. Fix it yourself. He closes the scroll slowly, his jaw tightens, and then, surprising even you, he laughs. A low, begrudging chuckle. She really is gonna make me earn it, he mutters. Hermes nods. She's a queen. Also, your storm fragment is leaking. Zeus glances down. The essence is glowing brighter, reacting. Possibly because it was just insulted. Possibly because he's inching closer to emotional growth. Historians still argue whether divine relics respond to the will of the wielder, or whether they simply feed off drama. Given the current situation, you suspect a little of both. By dusk, he's reached the fields of forgetfulness. Not the big river, just the meadows where gods go to sulk anonymously. He sits there for a long while, watching clouds shift, watching the world carry on without needing thunderbolts every 5 minutes. And then, something shifts. The little cloud above him grows. It gathers a few more wisps, swirls once. You hear a low crackle. Not much, but a beginning. Zeus stands, takes a breath, raises his hand, and nothing happens. Then again, what did he expect? He pockets the storm fragment again, this time with less frustration, more patience. He'll need help. Not just any help, specialist help. And he knows exactly who to ask. You shiver slightly. Because where he's heading next is not a place for casual visits. He's going to see Prometheus. You know, the guy he chained to a mountain for giving fire to humans. This ought to be awkward. You arrive at the base of the Caucasus Mountains, just before dawn, when everything is still dipped in lavender shadows, and the only sound is the occasional annoyed bleat from mountain goats. They're not here for the scenery. They just know Prometheus always has good gossip. Zeus, on the other hand, looks like a man preparing to apologize to someone he once dramatically chained to a cliff and sentenced to daily eagle peckings. Which, to be fair, is exactly what he's about to do. The path winds upward in dizzying spirals, loose stones shifting under each step. You notice Zeus is walking slower than usual. Not from fatigue. He's a god. He could leap the whole mountain if he wanted. But from something else. Humility? Guilt? Or maybe just the growing awareness that being king of the gods doesn't exempt you from facing consequences. Halfway up, a sudden whoosh breaks the silence. A shadow darts overhead. You look up just in time to see an eagle swoop by, talons extended, screeching its usual morning anthem of, "Where's that immortal liver?" Zeus flinches slightly. The eagle doesn't stop. It knows the route. Prometheus, as you may recall, is still up there. Still technically chained, still technically being punished. Although the punishment has gotten weird, In some versions, Heracles freed him ages ago. In others, he was never really chained, but just made to supervise a particularly boring rock. And in one fringe theory, no joke, he joined a traveling philosophers troupe and now gives TED Talks about responsible fire distribution. Historians still argue which version is canon. Zeus is hoping for the Heracles unchained him one, because frankly, he's not in the mood for a rescue mission. At last, you reach the ledge, and there he is, Prometheus, slouched casually on a boulder, not chained, sipping something suspiciously like herbal tea, and looking annoyingly wise. He doesn't even glance up. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he says. Zeus clears his throat. "You've been watching?" Prometheus smirks. "You leak lightning like a drunk god leaks secrets. Hard to miss." Zeus steps closer. "I need help." Prometheus finally looks at him. His eye. You take a breath and look around. The mountain peak is surprisingly calm. No chains, no blood, just space. Like a former battlefield that chose not to gloat. Zeus mutters, "So, what's the price?" Prometheus grins. "No price. Just instructions. You follow them, or you don't. Thunder doesn't come from rage, you know. Not real thunder. That's where you keep messing it up." He reaches into a leather pouch and pulls out a rock. Not just any rock, a chunk of magnetite, fused with what looks like globs of hardened cloud and strands of silver moss. He hands it to Zeus. "This is a resonator. You'll need to charge it with memory, not power." Zeus stares at it. Memory? Thunder is history. It's the sound of the sky remembering who it is. Pause. "I hate how poetic that sounded," Prometheus mumbles. "But it's true." You blink. That's oddly profound. And also a quirky tidbit. Some ancient Orphic cults believed that thunder was the voice of forgotten gods trapped in the sky, trying to reclaim their names. Wild, right? Zeus pockets the resonator. "So, I remember things?" "You relive them," Prometheus corrects. "Moments you regret. Moments you wish you could undo. You let them pass through the stone. And if it starts to hum, really hum, you're on the right track." That silence again. But this time, it feels less awkward, more honest. Zeus nods, thanks him, quietly, like it hurts, and turns to leave. Just before he goes, Prometheus calls out, "Hey." Zeus stops. "You're not a bad god, just a lazy one." Zeus almost laughs. "Working on it." And with that, you descend the mountain, slowly, carefully, the resonator warm in Zeus's palm. Later, in a hidden glade where the resonator vibrates gently in Zeus's hand as you walk with him down the sloped edge of the glade. It's heavier now, not in mass, but in meaning, and with each step, the world seems to quiet itself around him, as if giving the god room to think. A rare courtesy. He doesn't speak much for the next while. Maybe he's afraid that saying too much will break the hum. Or maybe, for once, he's just letting things settle. You cross a wide stretch of land known by mortals as the Windless Plateau. No breeze stirs here, no birds fly over it, just silence, heavy as honey. You feel it too, that weird pressure in the air when a storm is about to be born, but hasn't yet remembered how. Zeus finds a rock, sits on it, and closes his eyes again. The next memory he channels is smaller, a quiet kind of cruelty. One of those petty lightning zaps he used to toss toward Apollo when his music got too smug. Just a little singe behind the ear, never enough to harm, but enough to make his point. The resonator pulses again, louder this time. The sound has changed. It's no longer a hum. It's developing. Tone. A low thunder throat growl from somewhere between time and electricity. The sky remains still, but there's a flicker of acknowledgement in the clouds. Zeus exhales, and you realize he's sweating. Not from the heat, it's cool here. No, he's sweating from trying, which, for a being whose whole identity has revolved around authority and bluster, is probably harder than lifting a mountain. Another memory rises, not of violence, but of avoidance. You see him in the halls of Olympus, brushing past Hera while she stood beside a cracked fresco she had painted during their early courtship. The image depicted their wedding. Roses, doves, everything staged to look divine and awkwardly romantic. It had chipped. She had asked him to help fix it. He didn't even look. The resonator thunders at that one. Not a boom, not yet, but enough to make the earth murmur beneath your feet. That memory hurts. You can tell. His shoulders slump. And yet, he doesn't turn away. You keep walking together, the resonator tucked safely in his palm now, warm as a live coal. Midday passes in silence until you reach the hill of the forgotten echo, a place where gods sometimes come to rehearse their public speeches. The wind returns to the windless plateau, one slow, sighing gust that kisses the back of his neck and stirs the trees like a soft applause. The resonator trembles, cracks a little, glows from within. A sound rises, not quite thunder yet, more like the memory of it, like the sky clearing its throat after a long sulk. Zeus looks up, and for the first time in days, smiles. It's not smug, it's not theatrical, it's human. You almost forget he's a god, and then you remember he's still a god. Which is why when he stands and reaches toward the sky, the clouds pause mid-drift, like they're waiting. Not yet, he whispers, because he knows now that thunder isn't something you throw, it's something you earn, something you build, not from spite, but from memory and meaning. Back down the hill, he wraps the resonator in soft cloth and places it in a leather pouch against his chest. It's part of him now. A tool, a mirror, a promise. Quirky side note. In some obscure Hermetic texts, thunder was believed to be a sky confession, the moment the heavens admitted something shameful. Whether that's metaphor or madness, you're starting to think they were onto something. Zeus walks again, this time with less purpose, not because he's lost, but because he's found something, and it's not going anywhere. He's not ready to face Hera yet, not until he finishes the work. And so he veers south toward a coastal cave known only to the oldest gods, where one last piece of the storm waits, sleeping, unclaimed, the core. That's where he must go next. And you, well, you're going too, because someone has to watch and make sure he doesn't try to fast-track it with one of those shady underworld shortcuts. No offense, but Zeus with shortcuts is how most messes begin. By dusk, the landscape softens into a stretch of scrubby coastline where the wind smells like salt and seaweed and the occasional wet goat. You don't see the cave yet, but Zeus does. His eyes scan the horizon until they land on a shadow nestled between two cliffs. Subtle, almost bashful, like a secret the ocean's been keeping. He doesn't speak, just walks straight toward it. You follow, stepping carefully over slick rocks and barnacle-coated driftwood, the tide slapping lazily at your ankles. The cave yawns open in front of you. Not vast, not grand, but ancient. You can feel it in your teeth. The kind of place that existed before language, before thunder was even a thing. Inside it's dim, not dark. The walls glow faintly as if moonlight has been trapped in the stone. And there, nestled in a pool of still water at the far end, is the core. Not a weapon, not even a stone really. It looks like a knot of clouds suspended in amber, its tendrils frozen mid-twist. Inside it, sparks. Tiny, fluttering like fireflies. But they don't move randomly. They seem aware, slow blinking, waiting. Zeus kneels beside the pool. The resonator vibrates in his chest pouch, sensing the closeness of its other half. He pulls it out, unwrapping it with the tenderness of someone handling a newborn or a particularly fragile breadstick. He doesn't touch the core. Not yet. He just watches. The cave breathes around you, soft echoes bouncing between ancient ribs of stone. You almost forget you're standing next to the most temperamental deity in the pantheon. He's being quiet, listening. Even when a trickle of water drips directly onto his forehead, he doesn't flinch. Progress. He reaches out a hand slowly, touches the surface of the pool. It ripples once, then stills. The sparks inside the core twitch. You can feel it now, the old energy, the kind that predates Olympus, the kind that doesn't care about kings or lovers or frozen thunderbolts, just raw elemental pulse. This is the source of storm, not the drama, just the engine. Zeus places the resonator beside the pool. The glow inside it matches the light in the core. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, one long, deep hum. Not from either object, but from everything. The cave, the water, your ribs. The core floats an inch upward. The pool doesn't react. The water just moves aside like a good host. Then it speaks. Not in words, but in memory. A storm, not a specific one, just the feeling of it. Rain smacking rooftops, lightning splitting oak, thunder roll. The combined object glows once, then goes quiet. And suddenly, you know, it's done. Not fixed, rebuilt, from scratch. With memory instead of rage, with intent. Zeus doesn't look proud, or smug, or tearful. Just calm. He tucks the new thunder heart into his robes, stands up, looks around the cave like he's memorizing it, not to destroy it, just to remember where the real storm began. Quirky tidbit here, there's a fringe myth that says thunder is a heartbeat trapped in stone, and the gods have just been borrowing it. Tonight, that doesn't seem so fringe. Back outside, the moon hangs low over the sea. The wind has returned, not fierce, not loud, just playful, curious. Zeus breathes in deeply, his chest rising with a weight he's been carrying for eons. Then he exhales, and for the first time since the thunder froze, the sky rumbles softly in response. It's not a threat, not a flex, just a greeting. A hey, like the world is saying, welcome back. You walk beside him as he climbs the bluff overlooking the sea. It's time to head home, to Olympus, to Hera. And honestly, that part might be harder than anything he's done so far. Because thunder is easy to wield when you're angry. But to return after change, that's where the real lightning lives. He doesn't summon a storm chariot or call for winged transport. He just walks, step by step, like a mortal. And the sky watches and waits, because soon, very soon, it's going to thunder again. And this time, the boom will mean something. The garden responds with a soft breeze, rustling leaves that sound vaguely like sympathetic sighs. Somewhere in the distance, a pomegranate drops with ominous squishiness. For all her cool demeanor, Hera is furious. But this is not mortal fury. It won't come with yelling or thrown dishes. This is the fury of someone with the patience of eternity and access to supernatural storage lockers full of forgotten enchantments. Historical records, believe it or not, do hint at cult practices in ancient Samos and Argos that revered Hera not just as queen, but as punisher of broken vows. These cults had rituals involving freezing waters, iron offerings, and whisper chants under the moon. Modern archaeologists still debate whether these ceremonies were symbolic or meant to literally cool the fires of divine tempers. You have a feeling Hera is choosing the literal route. She leaves the garden. You float after her. Every step she takes echoes with purpose. Past the Hall of Mirrors, which only shows your worst angles. Past the Chamber of Echoes, where every complaint is repeated back in poetic form. And finally to a small, forgotten vault built from obsidian and sass. Inside, relics. Strange ones. A cracked hourglass filled with stardust. A broken harp string that hums in a minor key. And at the very back, glowing faintly blue, a clay jar sealed with layers of ancient wax. You barely breathe as she lifts the jar. Even the jar looks like it knows something bad is coming. This, dear sleepy listener, is Talentos Krios, the cold will. A spell from before the Olympians, back when gods froze time out of pettiness and bound hurricanes in jars just because someone looked at them wrong. It hasn't been used since that incident with the Titan who tried to flirt with Gaia and got stuck inside a glacier for 800 years. Hera doesn't need to read the instructions. She was there when it was made. Now here's the strange bit. There was once a temple inscription found in Lerna, mentioning a storm-calm Hera, one who locked the bolts of heaven for 7 nights. Historians still argue whether this was a metaphor for famine, marital protest, or just really strange weather. But in this version, you watch as Hera breaks the seal. A wave of unnatural chill sweeps through the room. Lightning, way up in the stratosphere, falters. Somewhere, Zeus burps and looks mildly confused. The air on Olympus begins to still. The clouds stop swirling. You swear you can hear thunder. Forget how to... Then she bends, just slightly, and picks up the thunder core. It hums in her hand. Not loud, but deep. Steady. A shared breath between 2 old, battered deities. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the beginning of Zeus's so-called second reign, a short-lived phase in which he attempted diplomacy, shared thunder access, and once even participated in group therapy led by Athena. Others think Hera just took over quietly and let him believe he still ruled. The truth, of course, is probably both. She turns the core over in her hand. "You made it hum again," she says. He nods. "And I didn't even fry a single island," he adds. She almost smiles. Almost. "You're still sleeping on the terrace." Fair. That night, thunder rolls across the heavens. Not loud, not flashy, just full. Like the sky finally exhaled something it had been holding in for centuries. And mortals everywhere sleep a little deeper, not knowing why. Just that the world feels a little more balanced. For now. Quirky sidebar. Some forgotten Hellenistic manuscripts claim that during this brief era, lightning actually became less destructive. It still struck, but with surgical precision. Tree, not house. Spear, not crowd. Zeus never confirmed this, but you're starting to think maybe that was the plan all along. As the palace settles for the night, you step out onto the balcony. The stars blink lazily again. You hear Hera's voice, low and tired, saying something you can't make out. Then Zeus chuckles. Just once. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real thunder. Olympus once again quiets. Not the awkward quiet of someone tiptoeing after a tantrum, but the kind of silence that follows a good long cry, or a rainstorm that soaked everything it possibly could and then just stopped. Zeus doesn't summon feasts or celebrations. That alone is newsworthy. No golden cups overflowing, no flute girls, no grand "I've returned, let's all applaud" parade. Instead, the palace finds itself in a strange lull. You wander its echoing halls like a tourist with backstage access, trailing Zeus from marble chamber to marble chamber as he reacquaints himself with the mountain he technically never left. You pass frescoes of past battles, him smiting titans, turning into animals, yelling at clouds, and in each one, his painted face is a younger, cockier version of the man now silently examining them. Eventually, he pauses before a particular mural. It's a dramatic piece, thunderbolt raised, hair flowing, a full "do not mess with me" expression aimed straight at Prometheus, who is in the process of being chained to a rock. You remember the story. Fire theft, eagle liver buffet, all that. Zeus studies it, then murmurs, "I don't even remember what I was yelling about." You do. It was fire, knowledge, mortals getting ideas. And it hits you. So many of his thunderbolts weren't about justice or balance. They were just reactions, gut sparks to things he didn't want to think too hard about. "I miss when things were simple," he says, voice softer than the painted flames licking Prometheus's legs. You almost say, "They never were," but he already knows that. Later, he visits the forge of Hephaestus, not to scold, not to command, just to sit. The god of fire is surprised, obviously. His eyebrows do that confused little owl thing. But he doesn't ask questions. He just gestures to a stool, wipes it off with a greasy cloth, and gets back to hammering. Zeus watches him work for a long time. The steady rhythm of metal meeting metal fills the silence. You sit too, letting the heat and noise wrap around you like a blanket. It's oddly soothing. Finally, Zeus speaks. "I need something new," he says. Hephaestus pauses mid-swing. "A weapon?" Zeus shakes his head. "No, not this time." Hephaestus studies him, then nods slowly. "Still forged from the old stuff?" A beat. "Yes," Zeus says, "but with guidance." And just like that, a project begins. You stay until the first shape is ready. The alloy sings when touched, like it's got its own soundtrack. And for once, Zeus doesn't grin like a child with a sparkler. He just holds it in both hands. Quietly. Reverently. There's power in restraint. He's learning that now. Slowly. Like a demigod trying to do math. Later that evening, you stroll the palace gardens with him. The air smells like lavender and long-forgotten arguments. Somewhere in the distance, Apollo is playing his lyre, badly, on purpose, to annoy someone, probably Artemis. Zeus turns to you. "You know," he says, "this isn't a redemption arc." You nod. "I don't get one," he continues. "Too much mess." You nod again. "But maybe," he adds, pausing near a sculpted hedge shaped like a disgruntled goat, "maybe I can at least be less loud." And for him, that's huge. There's a long-standing debate among fringe scholars, ones who dig through attic manuscripts and footnotes in abandoned monasteries,
who argue that the real punishment for gods isn't banishment or loss of power, it's memory. Remembering every outburst, every bad choice, every goat turned to stone because someone sneezed during an argument. And tonight, Zeus is heavy with memory, but also light with something else. Maybe intention, maybe hope, or maybe the simple realization that being the loudest voice in the room doesn't mean you're the strongest. That night, thunder grumbles softly across the sky, but this time, it's background noise, a lullaby, not a warning. Like the heavens themselves are whispering, "It's okay, you're learning." And for a god, that's rarer than lightning in a clear blue sky. Olympus settles into a strange new rhythm. Zeus, newly quiet, becomes something of a curiosity. The other gods wander past his chambers more than usual, pretending to need things, scrolls, nectar, misplaced sandals, just to sneak a glance. Some whisper about mid-eternity crises. Others, more dramatically, suggest possession by a minor woodland spirit with a patience kink. He ignores it all. Instead, he starts his mornings with long walks, no thunder, no entourage, just him. A robe that's definitely on backwards, and the occasional conversation with a startled satyr. You follow at a respectful distance, partly to observe, and partly because the last time he walked alone, he nearly befriended a boulder. The new staff, let's call it a thunder calm, since it barely crackles, is always with him now. It hums gently, pulsing like a heartbeat. He doesn't wave it around or use it to smite unruly squirrels. He just holds it, like a reminder. One morning, he finds Hera in the courtyard, inspecting the statue garden. "You moved Ares's war bust," she says, not looking at him. "It was glaring at the soup fountain." "It's supposed to." A pause. He doesn't argue, doesn't make a joke. Instead, he gestures toward the statue of Athena and says, "She always hated that nose." Hera almost smiles. "You're different," she says. "Trying," he replies. Later that week, something extraordinary happens. Zeus attends a council meeting without shouting. No lightning, no declarations, no dramatic mid-sentence exits. He listens. Like, actually listens. Even when Dionysus proposes a mandatory wine hour in every mortal city, Zeus doesn't roll his eyes. He just nods thoughtfully and says, "Let's put a pin in that." Historians still argue whether this meeting was a fluke or a sign of true reform. Some suggest the wine hour proposal secretly passed, which would explain medieval France. Others believe this era, brief as it was, marked Olympus's only attempt at semi-functional government. Regardless, it shakes everyone. Poseidon even drops his trident in shock. It breaks a table leg. Hephaestus pretends not to notice. You start noticing something else too. Mortals. They begin dreaming of calmer skies. Not necessarily sunny, but stable. A farmer in Thessaly prays for rain, and it comes gently. Just enough for the crops, none of the usual dramatic wind chariot stuff. You glance at the surface. His reflection flickers. Younger, older. None of them quite right. They shift with each thought.
That one, he says, pointing at a version of himself holding no weapon, no lightning, just standing quietly in a cloak. That one might be ready. You don't ask for what, because you know. Hera joins him at the pool the next night. No words, just two old gods sitting side by side, watching their reflections shift and settle like silt in a river. The quiet between them says more than millennia of shouting ever did. There's a lesser-known myth, recorded in only one surviving scrap of papyrus, that speaks of a night when the sky was so still that even the stars seemed to pause. No shooting lights, no omens, just a velvet silence, warm and deep. The myth says it happened once, only once, when Zeus fell asleep without dreaming of storms. And that night might be now. Because you watch him lean back, eyes flutter shut, thunder calm resting against his shoulder. No flashes, no rumbles, just sleep. The sky doesn't panic. It exhales. And somewhere far below, a child hears nothing overhead and smiles. Because even thunder gods need rest. And the world, miraculously, goes on without a single bolt. The next morning you wake to birdsong. Real birdsong. Not some phoenix's screech or a musical dove delivering divine subpoenas. Just birds. Ordinary, feathered, mildly confused by the lack of thunder. Zeus is already up, of course. You find him in the garden again, trimming ambrosia vines with pruning shears that are, frankly, beneath his station. A king of Olympus should not be this invested in gardening, and yet here he is, muttering about too many blossoms crowding the nectar flow. You half expect a squirrel to elect him mayor. It's been days since he last raised his voice, weeks since he summoned a storm just to make a point. Hera notices. She doesn't say it, but you see it in the way her hand lingers a bit longer on the balcony railing when she watches him. Like she's still trying to trust the calm. At dinner, yes, even gods eat for fun, he sits beside her and passes the honey-roasted ambrosia fruit without accidentally electrocuting the table. Progress. Ares is wildly uncomfortable. He keeps poking his father with a fork just to make sure he's not an imposter. Zeus ignores it. Mostly. One zap into Ares' goblet shuts that down. The real surprise comes when Athena speaks. I've noticed your storms have soft edges lately. It's not a compliment. Not quite a criticism either. Zeus chews slowly, then says, "Sharp edges weren't working." Apollo, across the table, dramatically gasps and pretends to faint into a laurel salad. Even Artemis looks up from her wolf stew and raises an eyebrow. This is the new normal now. And like any sudden cultural shift, Olympus doesn't quite know what to do with it. Zeus used to be the fulcrum around which all divine mood swings pivoted. If he was grumpy, the rivers flooded. If he was bored, mortals got turned into cows. Now he's just taking walks, writing things, listening to nymphs complain about drought-resistant lotus trees. Somewhere around the third council meeting of the week, gods now hold meetings. A minor titan raises a hand, timidly. Should we be concerned? They ask. Zeus tilts his head. About... Well, the titan says, it's just that without your thunder, we're not really feared anymore. The silence. Though historians still argue whether Zeus had truly changed, or whether this was just a particularly convincing bout of introspection brought on by Hera's cosmic grounding, fringe theorists suggest he was replaced by a celestial clone made entirely of self-reflection and lavender oil. No one's proven that theory, yet. But you know better. You've walked with him. You've seen the way his hand trembles, barely, when he holds the thunder calm too long. The way he takes slow, deliberate breaths when the clouds above start to swirl, as if he's wrestling with old instincts that don't quite fit anymore. One night, you find him watching a thunderstorm from the balcony. Not his thunderstorm, but a natural one, miles away, across the Aegean. He smiles. You know, he says, I used to think storms had to be loud to mean something. The rain falls in slow sheets, hushing the marble underfoot. But maybe it's the hush after, he adds. That's the part mortals remember. He's not wrong. Ask any sailor or shepherd, and they'll tell you. It's not the roar, it's the breath that follows, the sense that something greater passed overhead and chose to move on quietly. Maybe that's what Zeus is learning. Maybe that's what power looks like now. He turns to you, and for once, there's no lecture. No parable, just a quiet, almost embarrassed question. Do you think they'll believe it? He means mortals. He means Hera. He means himself. And the answer is simple. Maybe not yet, but the next thunder that rolls across the hills won't shatter windows. It'll rattle hearts, gently. There's a stillness to the mountain now. Not the kind that comes before a storm, but the kind that follows the last echo of thunder. A quiet Olympus, cradled in soft clouds, where even the statues seem to have unclenched a little. Zeus still walks the grounds, still listens more than he speaks. He's kept the thunder calm close, though it's less an instrument now and more a token. Like a reminder in his hand that says, you don't always have to roar. Tonight he lingers in the Hall of Echoes, a long corridor carved from memory itself. The walls shimmer faintly, rippling with sounds from past centuries, voices trapped in divine amber, echoes of things said in anger, triumph, confusion. You hear yourself in there too. Soft footsteps, muttered asides, the occasional exasperated sigh when Dionysus suggests fermented ambrosia seltzer. Zeus pauses beside one echo in particular, a much younger version of himself, booming across the chamber, threatening to hurl a city into the sea for mispronouncing his name. Classic me, he mutters. You both listen as the younger echo bellows again. I thought being loud meant being heard, the present Zeus says, quietly now. But it just meant I drowned everyone else out. He touches the wall, and the echo fades, not erased, just softened. You can still hear it if you listen close enough, but it no longer commands the space. That night, a messenger arrives from the mortal world, No scroll, no formal plea, just a small votive box, left at a forgotten altar. Inside, a thunderbolt carved from driftwood, no taller than a child's hand. Zeus holds it like it's made of gold. He turns it over once, twice, then places it on a shelf beside real ones. The difference is clear. One was made to command, the other to remember. And maybe that's what this was always about. Not power, but pause, reflection. A mortal sculptor, nameless and unassuming, offering a thunder god a different legacy. Later, in Hera's chamber, the two sit beneath woven starlight. No argument, no foot-stomping dramatics, just old immortals who've seen too much, learning to let go of what they thought was unchangeable. Hera speaks first. "You've been boring lately." He chuckles. "Thank you." She raises an eyebrow. "Don't get smug." Too late. You notice her hand rest atop his for a brief moment. No lightning passes between them. No frost either. Just warmth. That the god who once ruled with noise and fury found comfort in something softer. The thunder calm still hums, nestled beside old relics. No one dares move it now. You watch as Zeus, yes, that Zeus, finally leans back, eyes heavy, the faintest smile tugging his beard, and for the first time in millennia, Olympus sleeps peacefully. So do you. And now, the skies are quiet. The clouds drift lazily across the firmament, no longer heavy with judgment or the restless crackle of storms. Just soft shapes in the dark, carrying no message except peace. The stars above no longer blink with urgency, but glow faint and even, as though watching with quiet approval. You breathe slowly now, maybe deeper than before. In this stillness, the stories of gods, so loud, so bright, fade into gentle memory. Their shapes blur at the edges. Their thunder grows distant. They become like dreams you almost remember. A name here, a symbol there, but always softened by sleep. Let yourself drift with them. Let the hush of Olympus wrap around you like a weightless cloak. The air here is cool and clean, the kind of cool that wraps your skin without chilling it, like fresh sheets on a summer night. You can feel your breath settle, your body sink, and somewhere, far above the world, an old god closes his eyes, not in defeat, but in stillness. In the quiet between two bolts, you are safe here. The story has ended, not with a bang, not with a crash, but with a breath. Let your thoughts wander now, gently, without direction. Let them dissolve like mist on the hills. There is no need to remember the thunder, only the quiet that followed. Sleep well, traveler. You've made it through. Sweet dreams.